So last summer, my son Hudson, who was 6 years old at the time, told my wife and I he decided he wanted to go play t-ball. And he had never played t-ball before. He had never watched t-ball before, but he had some friends who were playing t-ball, including his buddy next door, Brady. And Hudson really wanted to play, and he really wanted to be on Brady's team. And so we decided, all right, cool, we can let you do that. And so we went and we signed him up. It was like literally the last day, the deadline to be able to sign up and register for this camp, which means also we were really close to his first game. So we got him signed up, and he had 1 week until his very first game. But as I said, he had never played before. So I was kind of concerned as a father. I got to make sure he doesn't go out and just completely embarrass himself. So we got to get together. We got to start working on the basics. And so I took him. We got a cheap glove, and he and I went out on the back porch, and I was going to make sure that he was able to throw, catch, and hit by the time game time came. And so we went there out in our backyard, and we start throwing the ball back and forth, and I'm trying to teach him the proper motion. And, of course, he's doing that thing that all kids do at first. They're kind of scared, and they're trying to catch it like this, you know. And so I'm trying to teach him how to do this, and we're working on it. And literally, like 10 minutes in, he looks at me, and he's like, "Dad, I don't want to do this." And I was like, "Whoa, no, listen, man. You said you wanted to do this. You begged to let us do this. We already signed you up. We already paid the money. We got to do this." He's like, "No, Dad, no. I said I wanted to play t-ball." And I was like, "Buddy, this is t-ball." And he's like, "What? When do I get the racket?" And I was like, "Oh, no, you think t-ball is tennis." And I realized, man, we've got our work cut out for us. So we work hard all week. We're getting through, and towards the end of the week, he's finally getting down like the whole catching thing, and he's starting to be able to throw a little bit better and hit some, and then it's time. Game time is there, and so we make our way to the field. He still hasn't been to a single practice yet. It's just been me and him. And we get there to the field a little bit early. We're about 10 minutes early, and there's another game going on out on the field while we wait. And so we stop, and he and I just sit there to kind of watch the game for a little bit. And at some point in this game, this kid gets a hit, hits the ball, and then he takes off running to first base. And Hudson turns to me, and he's like, "What's he doing?" And I'm like, he's running to first base. "What's first base?" And I go, like in that moment, it dawns on me, oh my gosh, I was so concerned about making sure he knew the basics, how to throw and run, that I completely forgot to tell him about everything else in baseball. I forgot to tell him that there are base runners, that there are pitchers, that there are I forgot to tell him everything, right? And so now I'm looking down on my watch. I realize I've got 5 minutes to teach a 6-year-old boy the whole game of baseball before he goes to play the game of baseball, right? And baseball's not a crazy complicated sport, but have you ever tried to explain it to a 6-year-old kid in 5 minutes? That's not easy, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, you know how you swing the bat and you try to get a hit. Well, if you miss it, then that's called a strike. And if you get 3 strikes, then you're out. He's like, "Of the game?" I'm like, no, not of the game, just for the inning, you go to the dugout. What's a dugout? Never mind, all right? If you hit it, you're going to run as fast as you can to that white thing over there. That's called first base. And you got to get there fast. And then once you get there, you need to stay on it, because if you get off and somebody gets you, you're out. But if another person hits it, you have to run away from there really fast to that other place, which is second base. But if you're in the field, then what you're trying to do is get the ball and get it to first base before the runner gets to first base so you can get him out. Well, what happens if the runner gets there before me? Am I out? No. You can't get out in defense, only when you're batting. And as I'm trying to explain all of this to him, it is dawning on both him and myself that we are in over our heads. That we have bitten off more than we can chew. Do you know that moment when you realize that something you signed up for was a lot bigger than you expected? That you committed yourself to something way more than you had actually bargained for. Maybe it was because someone kind of like asked you to come help them with something, and they kind of soft sold it to you a little bit, not telling you the whole story. Your dad says, "Hey, I need you to come out here and help me with a little bit of yard work for a minute." And like 6 hours later, as you're still raking leaves, you're like, "My dad freaking lied to me," right? Or you sign up for that AP chemistry class because, dude, chemistry's my thing. I love it, right? I can do this. And then like a week in, you're like, why did I think I could do this, right? You know that moment When you realize that you are in over your head, that you have signed up for something way bigger than you thought you could do or than you have the ability to do, you feel like, I think that moment, one of the times when it comes most in a person's life is in the decision to follow Jesus. In fact, I have a friend, Jim, who's on staff at the church I'm at back home, and Jim, whenever he baptizes someone, he likes to baptize them and then pull them out of the water, and one of the first things he says to them is, now you've got the rest of your life to figure out what you just did. Now, I think that's true. I think that's real, that this decision to follow Jesus is so much bigger than many of us even know when we jump into it. And we can try our best to grasp it and what it might cost and the commitment level, but there's no way to fully know until you're into it. You know what that's like? Some of you maybe have totally experienced that. Maybe you didn't grow up in church. You didn't grow up knowing about Jesus, but over in the last couple years, you got invited to youth group or you got invited to something like this, and you came along and you were having a good time, and somewhere over the course of a couple months, you began to hear more and more about Jesus, and you began to look around at these people who seem to be living different lives and enjoying that life and go, man, maybe there's something to this. And when you finally began to see who Jesus was, the Son of God who paid for the sins of the world and that he offers you eternal life, you said, yes, I finally see it now. This is what I want. And you committed yourself to Jesus and you signed up. And for the next few months, everything was amazing. Like everything felt new, including you. And you were so excited to finally have this purpose and meaning and joy that it felt like you were always missing. But then somewhere along the line, some of that newness began to wear off, and you realize that there's a lot more to following Jesus than just kind of signing up and getting excited. That there's a lot of demands placed on your life. That there are a number of commands that he gives to his followers. There's a lot of things that Christians don't do even when the rest of the world does. Things that you used to do in your old life that you seem to enjoy so much, and you look back now and you're not doing those things, and you kind of wonder about them. And you go, man, I don't know if this is what I signed up for. Or maybe this is what I signed up for. I just didn't know it would be this hard. Or maybe you're like me. I grew up in church all my life. I grew up in a Christian home all my life. And so I already knew all the things that Christians don't do. I already knew the behaviors to avoid. And so that wasn't that much of a problem. But the further I got into following Jesus, and the more and more I began to read and hear about what he was calling me to do, to deny myself, to lower myself and serve other people, to forgive and love my enemies even when they have hurt me. And I start to see all the things that it looks like to be like Jesus. Maybe you're in that spot too, and maybe you're feeling it, that this thing that was once so amazing and so beautiful to you has started to feel kind of burdensome. That it's started to feel a little bit draining. And you wouldn't say it out loud. You wouldn't say this to anybody else, but the truth is, following Jesus, well, it's kind of begun to feel something like this. Something that you thought was exciting, but now it kind of feels restrictive. It kind of feels like it's holding you back, like it's confining you. You look at your friends and the way they're living, your friends who aren't Christians, and the partying or the things that they're doing. Literally, they can look at whatever they want on the internet and not go to bed feeling guilty or shameful about that. And they can live their lives for themselves, and it seems so freeing. Have you felt that? Let me be real honest with you for a second. If you have not felt that yet, sooner or later, more than likely you're going to. That feeling will probably come to you at some point in your life, which is what makes John's statement that we're about to read in 1 John 5 so weird. So counterintuitive. Go with me real quick to 1 John 5, verses 1 through 5. 1 John 5, starting in verse 1, he says this: "Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has become a child of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves his children too. We know we love God's children if we love God and obey his commandments. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but John just hit his three things again. That we believe, okay, that we live to obey, and that we love the brothers and sisters. He comes back to it over and over and over again. And you may think, John, you're being overly repetitive, but John would say to you, no, it's because it's that important that you need to hear it time and time again. But then verse 3, that's the weird one. Here's what he says. Loving God means keeping his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. Wait, what? Not burdensome. This is the same John that says that we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. This is the same John that says, if you're a Christian, then you should not love the world or anything in the world. This is the same John that says to be a Christian means that you live the same kind of life that Jesus lived. And that is the Jesus who says things like, turn the other cheek, make yourself the servant or slave of all. He's the one who says, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. How in the world can John say that those commands are not burdensome? His name was Jason, and I met him after an Easter service one Sunday at our church. And it came up, and you could see it in his eyes that he was in this period of life where he felt just completely lost and broken. And he didn't know what to do with his life, and he was wondering if this Jesus thing might be the answer. And so he and I began to meet together on a regular basis every week, and we started just reading through the Gospel of Mark together. And it was so cool to watch his eyes light up, to see things clicking as he began to see Jesus as he is, to be able to understand who he really was. And we read, and he saw and understand more and more. And then by the end of the next school year, I had the privilege of getting to baptize Jason as he committed his whole life to following Jesus. Yeah, it was cool. And then after that, I got to watch Jason begin to grow and mature, and he was becoming he was this brand new person with this different kind of life, and he was following, and he was becoming a leader in our campus ministry, and it was so amazing to watch. And then one summer, something happened. And I didn't know exactly what it was. All I knew is that Jason came back from summer break, and there was something different in him. There was this cynicism in him that I had not seen before. He slowly began to disengage from our group, from our campus ministry, and from the church, and from other things. And I could not figure out what was happening. And finally, I invited him over to my house and said, we got to talk, man. And so we sat down, and I said, dude, what's going on? You got to explain to me. This is near the end of his senior year. And he began to explain and began to talk with me, and he was honest. And the truth is, it wasn't any one thing. It was just that he felt tired. It was just that this life of following Jesus and all the commitments and all the commands and all the things he's supposed to do just start to feel draining to him. And he started wondering, do I really believe that, as a Christian, I'm not allowed to even have sex with my girlfriend? Do I really believe that any of my friends who don't believe in Jesus, that they're really going to go to hell? Can I really get behind that? And he started talking about how he had this really great job lined up after he graduated, and he was going to make a lot of money, and he really was. And he was honest with me. He told me, I know that if I'm following Jesus, I know that God's going to expect that I don't keep all that money for myself, that I need to be giving some of that away, and I don't know if I want to do it. And it was like I could see him. It was like I was watching this young man trying to shake loose of this burden that he felt like he was carrying, trying to get off these chains from amongst him, this way of life that had once felt so exciting to him, but had become so restrictive in his mind. And some of you are there right now. Some of you feel so weighed down by the burden of following Jesus, and it feels so lifeless, and it feels so stressful, and it feels so frustrating, and you haven't told anybody this. Maybe you haven't even mentioned it in your own mind to yourself, but the truth is, you're strongly considering just throwing these chains off. In fact, I would bet that there are some people in this room right now who've already got plans to do so, who know that the moment you get out of the house, that you're free to live your life like you want to, and you're kind of looking forward to that. You're just biding your time. If that's you, can I tell you a secret this morning? Here's the secret. You're right. You do have chains on you. You are burdened and bound up, but here's the other part of the secret. Those chains, that thing that's holding you down, that's not Jesus. That's not his commands. You need to note that. You know how I know that? Do you know why I know that? Because Jesus said so himself. In Matthew 11, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you" what? More burdens? No, I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. It's not Jesus that you're feeling weighing you down. So what is it? Let me try to illustrate this for you for a second. Imagine for a moment a young man who has grown up his entire life, from like the moment he was a baby, grown up his entire life in a pitch black dungeon. And also, from the time he was a young child, he's grown up with these chains around his wrist. For as far back as he can remember. But the thing is, he doesn't know that he has chains on. Because remember, it's pitch black in there. And this is all he's ever had on. This is all he's ever known. And so, he knows that he can only move his arms so much. And he knows that they get heavy. But he just thinks that's natural. He's never seen the chains that are on his wrist. And then one day, someone comes in and opens the door and brings a lantern in with him. And as light floods into the dungeon, this young man looks down and sees these chains on him for the very first time. But instead of being grateful to the man with the lantern, he gets angry. Look at what you just did to me. How could you do this to me? Why would you do this? And the man with the lantern says, I didn't do that. I didn't put those on you. Of course you did. Look, they were never here until you showed up. I never saw these until you walked in the room with that lamp. We would say that that young man, that poor young man, is foolish and ignorant. No. The lantern's not putting chains on him. The lantern's just exposing the chains that have always been there. What if you and I are a lot like that young man? And what if God's commands are like that lantern? What if God's commands are not there to restrict you or enslave you? What if they've come to show you that you've been a slave your whole life and you didn't know it? What if that's the purpose and the point? In fact, I think that's true. That's what Paul says in Titus 3:3, that before Jesus came into our life, we were foolish, disobedient, deceived, and enslaved by our passions and pleasures. But you catch that, not just enslaved by our passions and pleasures, deceived, which means you were a slave and you didn't know it. You thought that the reason that you lived the way that you did, the reason you lived only to please yourself, the reason you lived to go and do whatever made you feel good in the moment, whatever made you feel right, was because you were free to do all that. What you didn't know is that you couldn't have lived any differently if you had tried to. You didn't have a say in the matter. You were enslaved to your sin. You were enslaved to your passions and to your selfishness. And then Jesus came. And when Jesus came, he began to show you by his way of life and by his commands and his instruction a new kind of life. He began to show you what real freedom looks like. He began to show you how you could live the life you were designed to live, the life you were made to live. But here's the really cool thing about Jesus, is that when God sends Jesus, he doesn't just send him with a lamp, he sends him with a key. He comes to set you free from these, not just show you that they're there. This is what he says in Colossians 3:1, that God has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. He has rescued us from the tyranny, from the rule, from the enslavement of our old life, and he has brought us into the kingdom of Jesus. He came to set you free from those things. So I know what you're asking, then why does it feel so hard? Why does following Jesus still seem to be so difficult? Listen, I'm not arguing with you there. It is hard to follow Jesus. It is difficult to follow Jesus, but you need to know this. The difficulty is not him. It's not because his rules are overbearing. It's not because his commands or his way of life is harsh. It's because when you have lived so long a certain way, living only for yourself, living to please yourself, it's really difficult to break free of those things. Old habits die hard, and what happens for so many of us, including me, is that Jesus has come and rescued me and set me free so that I can live a new life, and yet so often I come running back to these chains like there's some kind of security blanket. Like the old behavior that I engaged in was somehow pleasing me and making me happy and free, and I find myself in chains all over again. I start blaming God when he tells me that they're there. I find myself running back over and over again, but listen, it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to live like that. Look at what John says in the rest of this passage. John 5, starting in verse 4, "For every child of God defeats this evil world, and we achieve this victory through our faith. And who can win this battle against the world? Only those who believe that Jesus is the Son of God." See, what John says is actually, as a child of God, as someone who is his, you have the ability to throw these off. You have the ability to defeat the world and all of its temptation and all the ways it keeps trying to pull you back. You can be free of that. Why? Because you're awesome? Because you try really hard? No, John says, because of your faith in Jesus. Because when you place your faith in Jesus and you belong to him, the Bible tells us that he puts his Holy Spirit in us. And that Holy Spirit gives us an ability and a power that we never had before to grow in holiness and to throw off the chains that have been holding us back for so long. Brothers and sisters, whatever it is holding you there, if God's Spirit is in you, they don't have to be on you anymore. And for those of you who don't know Jesus yet, for those of you who've still not chosen to follow him, listen, you don't have to keep walking in darkness anymore. You don't have to keep walking around with these chains pretending like they're there because you want them to be. Pretending like, this isn't chains, this is just a scarf. I like it like this. Right? No, you don't have to do that. You have a choice laid out before you because of what Jesus has done for you. So here is my question for you this morning. I don't know what your chains are. I don't know what behavior or what sin keeps binding you or holding you back or wrapping you up, but I know this, that you have a choice today. And so, are you going to keep walking around like this your entire life? Or are you, by the grace of God, through faith in Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, are you finally going to go free?